Hello and welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organization defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. Congratulations on getting here. We are almost all radical feminists here, so possibly the epitome of TERFs. We have been radical feminists since the 1970s, and our analysis of gender identity ideology has been consistent since then, for 50 years. We were not surprised when it came along, and we have not changed our analysis. In 2018, we wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights, which lays out our position, which has been signed by 38,374 people from 160 countries and is supported by 531 organizations. We have volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent. Please join us. You can also become a member of WDI to help our work by volunteering or donating. If you would like more information, you can email us at info@womensdeclaration.com or via your country contact on the website, which you can find at womensdeclaration.com. So our program today will be Ina and Judith from Germany, who will be talking about the upcoming demonstration against the German self-ID law on November 1st. And then we'll move on to hear from Arielle and Julia Beck, who will be talking, also from Germany, who will be talking about the radical feminist lesbians at the Berlin Dyke March. That will be followed by some news from the United States and Australia. So moving on to Ina Wagner. Ina is the coordinator of the radical feminist grassroots initiative Lasst Frauen sprechen. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The initiative is founded to fight against misogynist politics in Germany. Their issues they focus on are male violence, legal prostitution, efforts to legalize surrogacy and egg donation, the German self-ID law, violence against mothers and children in family courts, women as victims of religious ideologies, and women's poverty, among other issues. They take to the streets with demonstrations and inform people about what's going on. So with that, I will turn it over to Ina.
Dear sisters, we are in need. We, that is women, not only in Germany, worldwide, whether west or east, whether north or south. In April this year, the German government adopted the Self-ID Act, legally replacing the category of sex with gender. As of the 1st November, every German adult can change their civil status to the opposite sex and their new name. Anyone who continues to refer to a man who claims to have a female gender identity as a man can be fined up to 10,000 euros. Parents can choose the official gender for their newborn child. After the age of 5, the child's consent will be required. Children aged 14 plus can apply to a family court if their parents do not support their belief in their wrong body. More information about the German Self-ID Act can be found in the chat now, and thanks on our women support. The German government is selling its misogynistic policies as feminist. Such hypocrisy is unbearable. The German government ignores the voice of women rights activists in the country. But it also ignores UN voices denouncing violation of women's rights in Germany, such as prostitution has been legal for over 20 years. Violence against mothers and children, the harmful and unscientific PAS, parental alienation syndrome, concept is still being used in family courts, restricting the political participation of women. Women are prevented from talking about sex-based violence. Recently, the UN Special Reporter on Violence Against Girls and Women, Riem Al-Salem, published a 70-page letter on the Self-Determination Act to our federal foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock. In it, she asks the federal government how they intend to ensure the protection against violence and the safety of girls and women with this legislation. A meaningless 3-page reply came back from the permanent mission of Germany to the United Nations. Women's voices are being ignored. All we hear from politicians is nothing will be taken away from you. Nothing will be taken away from you. A penis is not a male genital per se. No doctor can attest from their mere looks which sex a person has. Trans women are women. I see no need for any discussions. This is no stand-up comedy. There are original quotes from our politicians. 2 of them from the Department for Families, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. One of them is from the minister herself. To us, this is a massively misogynistic and child-hostile development. Women will not allow reality to be destroyed by legal fiction. Politicians need to know that we stick to reality. We fear that German jurisdiction will serve as model for other countries. On the 1st of November, the day the Self-ID Act takes effect in Germany, we will organize a demonstration in front of the German Bundestag. Our motto will be, for science, democracy, women and children, away with the so-called Self-ID Act. We are asking women in other countries to demonstrate against the Self-ID Act in front of German embassies and consulates on the same day. Politicians should know that women from all over the world are observed them. We are fed up with their gaslighting. The idea of asking women in other countries whether they would demonstrate in front of German embassies worked. I thought, hopefully we can find 2 to 5 crazy women who will do something in 1 to 3 countries. We are so happy to realize that the world is full of crazy women who are already showing solidarity with us. We are absolutely overwhelmed with this solidarity. We will use an logic from our book 1984 for our demo. Maybe it will inspire you too. We have prepared a letter template based on the letter from Rim Al-Salem to Annalena Baerbock with questions about the Self-ID Act. You can customize the letter and send it to the embassy or consulate on your behalf and request a response. Invite the ambassadors and consuls to your demo for a chat. We've seen them go out and talk to us. Take pictures in front of the embassies and consulates with your posters and post them on all networks on the 1st November with our activity hashtags self-ID harms and women rise. When it is too late, we in Germany says, es ist 5 nach 12. It is 12:05. This means act now, otherwise it's over. Let's protest together all over the world against the arrogance and hypocrisy of misogynistic politics on the 1st of November, starting at 12:05. Let's make this feminist protest visible worldwide. We want the so-called gender identity to be removed from all laws because self-ID harms women's rights. This should be removed from EU, UN, and laws on all our countries. If you can contact us at the email address on our website. Thank you very much.
And now we'll go on to Judith. Judith, welcome.
I'm actually the sidekick, if you want. I am, well, known as Escort Berlin or Women Speak Out, Frauen sprechen. We organize this rally together, and I am responsible for the security. So women might think, oh, okay, it's we know from worldwide events that it gets sometimes a bit dangerous. And I want to assure you that we've got a team looking into that. We've got a team of women who are for the security, like stewards, with inspiration by rallies you do abroad. And we are in close contact to the police in Berlin, and I can assure you that the police in Berlin are okay when you're in contact with them, you explain it, what's going on, and they will be there to protect us. That's what they do for everybody who does a rally in Berlin. So for those who might be, well, a bit nervous about it, don't. I think it's all in good hands with our team. I want to add that don't know if I didn't get it, but we had a international Zoom last week. Many women were there, and we're absolutely thrilled that so many women see the importance to support their German sisters. And I am very, very, well, we are very, very grateful. The idea came up to do the rallies in the other countries at 12:05 in the given country, so that the whole action rolls over the globe, so that you know, if you want to do something in China, well, maybe not, but New Zealand, whatever, go to the German embassies at 12:05 your time, and then that way it will roll like 24 hours if it happens. And from this place, I want to say thank you, Ina. Ina is the one who gave the idea that we should do that. She thinks big and she acts big, and I'm very, very happy that I may support the initiative Let's Frauen sprechen by, well, as much as I can. So we will we will do Zoom meetings with women we know or who contact us beforehand to get more information and who want to join or inform us what they are doing in their countries. But there's an open Zoom, no, not Zoom, X, X space on October 12th at 22 hours in the evening, German time, to give the women in, well, Asia, you know, that like Australia, Asia, to give them the opportunity to join, because otherwise they're at work or asleep. Well, anyway, October 12th, 22 hours Berlin time. Please calculate that for yourself, if possible. I will post a link to that space on Twitter. I couldn't do it before because they only accepted like 3 weeks in advance or something. So please make sure to follow Lass Frauen sprechen or me, Escort Berlin. You'll find everything about me when you just Google Escort Berlin. join me on X, and you will get the information when this space is happening. It will be in English, of course. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we will hand it over to Arielle and Julia, who will talk about radical feminist lesbians at the Berlin Dyke March. Over to you, Arielle and Julia.
My name is Julia, and I'm joined with my friend Arielle. We were both participants of a kind of lesbian feminist action at the Berlin Dyke March this past summer. And so, as Arielle said, I will give some context about this action, and then she can explain more about what really happened there, and the political impacts of all of that. So just for some context, in Berlin, there exists the Berlin Dyke March, and it is written with an asterisk after the word Dyke. In the German language, the asterisk or the star, Sternchen, it's used to say that whatever word it follows is inclusive of everyone who wants to be part of that word. So if the asterisk follows the word woman, Frau, it means this word Frau not only refers to women, Frauen, but also anyone else who wants to be a woman on that day. And so this holds true for the Berlin Dyke March as well. The Berlin Dyke March is written Berlin Dyke * March. This event is absolutely inclusive, and it was always intended to be inclusive. Since maybe 10 years, it's been happening in Berlin and growing slowly over time. It's for lesbians and friends. And the stated intention of this event, of the Dyke March, is simply to increase lesbian visibility. This is a bit contradictory because they use the asterisk. But anyway, this year, the organizers said that everyone is welcome. All lesbians are welcome. All friends are welcome. Everyone is welcome. It's super inclusive. And that's always been the case. So there was a group of lesbian feminists who had been witnessing the developments in lesbian communities. And we wanted to hold the organizers at their word. If they said that every lesbian is welcome, then lesbian feminists should also be welcome, right? Some of the lesbians behind the scenes who were also part of the organizing team for this lesbian feminist block had already organized a demo in October of 2023, and that went pretty well. And so we thought, okay, let's try to join the Dyke March. So we planned to have a block. Basically, we would be in the formation of a square, marching together, with signs that were pro-woman, woman-centered. But I'd like to quickly read from the statement that we published on our Instagram page. And the statement clarifies like why we did this. So it says simply, I won't read the whole thing. I'll read part of the beginning just to give you an idea of what we wanted to do and why. So it says, we are a group of lesbian feminists who believe in the power of collective political action. Lesbian visibility is a key element of our feminist politics. So for this reason, we want to be visible as lesbians and feminists. This is why we participated in the Unified Lesbian Feminist Bloc in the 2024 Berlin Dyke March. The statement continues to say, for several years, lesbians like us are pressured to soften, suppress, or recant our feminist politics. We recognize that, unlike our lesbian feminist foremothers, the zeitgeist is currently against us, but we refuse to be fearful in silence. We want to encourage other lesbian feminists to become active participants in lesbian culture. We want to take up space at an event that should include us. We exercise our right to attend the Berlin Dyke March as lesbians and feminists. So you can read the rest of the statement in full on the Instagram page. But that's a bit of the context of what was happening and what we what we got into.
Okay, so we were a pretty good group and we gathered there. There were other groups, but I would say we're the most visible, limited group with our lots of signs and chants and everything. So we had beforehand prepared and gathered together to repeat some chants and to have a look at signs and to see how we could organize also on the security side to be sure everybody's safe, which is super important. And so we arrived there. There were already a good police presence. So when we started the march, there were a lot of people, but we were not the first. We were pretty front, but there were other groups of lesbians in front of us, and we could actually carry our sign pretty safely. And we had prepared a lot of signs that were very lesbian-centric, I would say, because we wanted to put a focus on what we considered are the relevant topics around lesbian and lesbian feminism, like the critiques of porn, the critique of the way gender dysphoria is handled today, and also just using lesbian-centric vocabulary, like no asterisks, no point, no inclusivity language, just talking about lesbians, and which is already, unfortunately, today an act of resistance. So we went there with our signs and it was pretty safe at the beginning, and we had reactions from people like middle fingers from queer groups and other demonstrators. Nothing physically violent though, for maybe the first 30 minutes. And at some point, we arrived into a narrower street and a group of more violent activists and trans activists, obviously, surrounded us and really created this kind of very claustrophobic atmosphere around us. So we had to protect ourselves, and also thanks to the police presence who escorted us and who physically protected us, but they were screaming us to leave, and they were super angry about some of our signs. I think the sign criticizing porn received some hate, and my sign, I think, received also a lot of hate because I had made a pretty big sign. I'm just going to explain the context of this sign a bit, because I think it also triggered a bit the people at the demonstration, the other demonstrators. I was front row with a big sign written on it: "Gender is the cause of dysphoria, not the solution." So it's a sign I saw during a feminist Women's Rights Day demonstration in Berlin in 2020. Like a super brave woman was carrying it, and she was a bit alone, and I was super impressed because the reactions can be a bit violent. And so I did this sign, I repainted this sign, and I was not really expecting to have a big dialogue on that day with people about that topic, but maybe just trigger a certain contradiction in the movement. And that I was hoping, and I'm still hoping, that women saw it, some women saw it, and women who support the transgender system, and to make them ask themselves what they're supporting. Because if you remove biology from the debate and the sense of what men and women are, you're left with the same stereotypes that are alienating women. So I wanted just maybe that at some point they can remember this sentence if they have a feeling of contradiction in their queer groups and queer discussions, and that maybe triggers some questions.
But what happened to this sign?
The sign got torn apart. No, just beheaded. But yeah, they went after it, but they went after also the big banner that we had on the front, which was just saying, lesbians forever. No, like something very
Something like our love for women is our strength.
Yes, like nothing controversial. So they like nothing. None of our signs were violent anyway, so we weren't targeting anybody.
Can you say what happened when we were eingekesselt, when we were like totally surrounded?
Yes, so yeah, so they surrounded us. Someone threw also an apple trunk at us. They were also singing in front. I mean, yes, the police was forming a row in front of us at that point so that the group of trans activists could not hurt us physically. I think I saw someone from, was it a minister or a journalist, a trans-identified man who's a journalist, who was also like yelling a lot of very aggressive things at us, basically telling us to leave. The organization was also there. They were not supporting us, but they could not expel a group of lesbians from the Dyke March. So they stood up to what they had said from the beginning. Yeah, we, I guess, stuck together. It was a pretty violent moment, I think, for everyone. It was difficult to defend ourselves, but we did, and we also wanted to stand there and to say that we belong there more than trans identified males, I think.
Do you remember what we were singing? Because as
yes, thank you.
we were surrounded, we just sang the whole time. Or we
Well, yeah,
chanted.
yeah, we were singing Viva Viva Lesbiana, and we were doing these signs also with our hands, and we were also singing this chants that we have that says lesbian all together rise up and shout out and say no. And it was really nice to sing together in that moment, to also comfort each other a bit.
I learned it from Paula Bolton, actually, who's doing a lesbian strength march in Leeds right now. Shout out Paula. So it's a song that I learned from her, but then we changed it to be about lesbians. So lesbians like us, join hands together, or link arms together. Lesbians all over the world, rise up and shout
no.
Yeah. We were just singing that like over and over and over.
Yes. And Viva Viva Lesbiana a lot.
Too many times.
No, it was great. I mean, it was perfect. We did very well.
And we could rejoin the march too.
So we finished the march. Yeah, the police escorted us, and we, at the end, we were at the back for safety reasons, I guess. They wanted to avoid any physical confrontation, but we could finish the march, and then we could stay together and also talk to maybe one or two women who had questions about what we're doing, and we could keep on with the discussion a bit after the march, where the tension was going down a bit. And yeah, I think it was important, and yeah, I'm glad we did it.
I'm glad we did it too. And just as a final note, there is going to be something next year in Berlin in June. So check the Instagram. I put it in the chat, lesbian.demo.berlin at Instagram. And there will be some more updates. Yeah, we're not going to stop.
One thing is just to note, as people were noting in the chat, it's telling that they got angry at your anti-porn sign, right? That tells us something. And I also just wanted to offer that in some previous marches, in terms of singing, some of us, when we get attacked, have sung the woman, adult, human, female song, which becomes very disarming. People become very confused when a bunch of women just start singing woman, adult, human, female. They just become very confused and disarmed. So my question for both of you, with respect to the people who were attacking you, I'm wondering if they were mostly male, who, men who call themselves lesbians, or female. And part of the reason I'm asking is because I have found, when I've done my own activism in this, that there are a lot of women who will oppose us, right? There are a lot of women who will stand up for the men who are calling themselves women, but it's the men who are really, really scary. And so the women will act kind of strange and bang on pots and pans and shake their heads and whatnot, but they don't tend to act in very threatening ways, which the men do. And I'm just curious if that was your experience or if you had a different experience during the march.
The very first people who came in front of us were two guys in like long dresses, skirts or whatever. Like I would assume that they do not consider themselves to be men. And they were carrying this banner that said queerocracy now. And most of the people who I heard leading the chants against us had very deep male voices. There were a lot of women also shouting along.
I would say it was half.
Mm.
Probably half male, whatever they think of themselves, and half women. And physically, the men were a bit creepy, I agree, because one also had a t-shirt just in front of me with it was written on his t-shirt, perverse, like pervert, or perversistan, something with the word pervert in it, like the reign of perversity, something like that, just in front of me. So I knew a bit who I was talking to. And but there were young women also. I noticed pretty, maybe 20-year-old women were in front of me, and I was at the front at some point. It's pretty long, so I could really have a good overview of who was there. And definitely a few trans-identified men with lots of porn codes on the side and things like that. So the same sample as we've seen before.
I mean, when we were stopped and surrounded, we were in a really narrow street, and the entire rest of the march that had been behind us had to like squeeze around us. And so there was no way for anyone not to see what was happening. And then I think by being forced to witness what was happening, a lot of the women who were in the march actually just joined in, because the people were saying, what, TERFs go home? TERFs verpisst euch. Yeah, TERFs fuck off.
Kind of vermisst euch.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna miss you. I have to, I'm remembering now that when I was holding the one of the banners on the front, 2 or 3 times people tried to tear it.
Yeah.
And it was always men. I had to, they were pretty strong, so
They got your sign though.
yes, we got almost everything. Yes, it's still there decorating my flat.
We're going to have some news clips from Australia and the US.
Okay, hello everyone. Here's the report from the United States this week. Last week, WDI USA submitted a public comment to Meta's Oversight Board, which is soliciting them with regard to 2 cases it is reviewing concerning gender identity that arose under their bullying and harassment community standard policies. One case involves men and women's public bathrooms, and the other involves men and women's sports. Because Meta provides speech platforms, they also invite comments to address free speech in relation to what they term the rights of transgender people. Our response references Declaration Articles 1, 4, 7, and 8, and concludes that humans cannot change sex. Women and girls, along with all other citizens, should have the right to reject the lie that some men are women without being censored. Hate speech policies that prevent people from referring to a man as a man are dangerously undemocratic. Free speech must not be curtailed because a man's feelings might be hurt by being called a man. If we cannot tolerate hurt feelings, we cannot tolerate democracy. We also circulated a mailing to Declaration signatories encouraging them to give Meta their opinion on gender identity individually, using our public comment as a template. The Wall Street Journal published an interesting piece last week. Apparently, conservative filmmaker and social media activist Robbie Starbuck has had significant success with his campaign to push companies to ditch their DEI policies. So far, automaker Ford, motorcycle manufacturer Harley Davidson, Lowe's, rural retailer Tractor Supply, tractor maker John Deere, distiller Brown-Forman, which makes Jack Daniels, and Molson Coors have all dialed down their diversity initiatives, and most have specifically indicated they would be distancing themselves from the Human Rights Campaign. Additionally, Ford and other companies have announced plans to stop providing data for the Corporate Equality Index produced by HRC's foundation, which helps gauge how friendly the company's policies are to LGBTQ people. Quoting from the article, the focus on the HRC, and in particular its equality ranking, marks a shift in efforts to unwind diversity initiatives in the private sector. I can only wish him continued success in this endeavor. Next, I'd like to mention a few upcoming events. First, as Wolf Director Sharon Burden mentioned last week, Wolf is hosting a Pennsylvania Women's Upraising rally to demand the end of all forms of violence against women and girls, scheduled to take place in Philadelphia on the 14th. Next will be WDI USA's annual convention, Amplifying the Women's Liberation Movement, in Atlanta from September 20th to the 22nd. I'm so excited to be attending this year after being offered the opportunity to present an overview of the WDI book, Women's Rights, Gender Wrongs, as a means of encouraging US sales, which have consistently lagged behind those of our European sisters. And finally, WDI USA volunteers will be joining a coalition of organizations, including the LGBT Courage Coalition, Our Duty, DIAG, LGB Alliance, Wolf, and Do No Harm, for a peaceful public action during the 2024 American Academy of Pediatrics Conference taking place in Orlando, Florida at the end of the month. The coalition will be telling the AAP to stop medicalizing kids in light of the Cass review and the lack of scientific evidence that supports the safety or effectiveness of such treatments. Of note, Admiral Rachel Levine is scheduled to be a keynote speaker. That's all from me today. Thank you.
I also just want to note, Admiral Levine is also under investigation by a congressional committee. So that's a little bit of good news for this week.
Giggle of Giggle and Tickle fame has barrister Stuart Wood now listed on its crowdfunding page, which suggests that plans are in motion for an appeal. The deadline is 28 days from judgment. And Wood is King's Counsel, having been awarded the Order of Australia, and specialises in industrial relations, specifically focused on freedom of speech and belief. Reem Al-Salam has already also published a statement in response to the Tickle and Giggle ruling from the Federal Court, and I'll put a link to it in the chat. The e-petition against the proposed New South Wales Equality Bill exceeded 20,000 signatures. This triggers a mandatory debate in Parliament. So note that not all states in Australia have this trigger, and the Commonwealth Parliament doesn't have it. So many bills go undebated. The Equality Bill not only introduces self-ID for birth certificates, it removes prostitution from the Summary Offences Act, legalises overseas commercial surrogacy, allows children under 16 to consent to gender-affirming medical interventions, and things like that. Jasmine Sussex's, the expiry date of the bill at the moment is the end of October, so that debate will happen relatively soon. Jasmine Sussex's matter before the Queensland Tribunal is now fully public. She has complaints of vilification and harassment against her from Jennifer Buckley. That's a biological man who fed chemically induced nipple discharge to his baby, and Jasmine criticised the practice. The Royal Women's Hospital has given a statement to the media in support of this practice and has confirmed that it does support these men with trans IDs to do this. I'll put a link to her case page in the chat. Note that her solicitors are acting pro bono, so the crowdfunding is not for the solicitors. They're a Christian law firm. They act in many freedom of belief and expression matters, regardless of the beliefs of the actual client. Although my understanding is that they are supportive of Jasmine's case. MP Maury Deeming's discrimination suit against leader of the Victorian Liberal Party, John Pesutto, starts this coming Monday, the 16th of September in Melbourne. This is in relation to her being characterised by him as a Nazi or having Nazi-aligned views following the 2023 Let Women Speak rally. That's all from Australia. Thank you.
for a few minutes, we could have a chat about what we think is going on with the offer from the right and from the left. So I've been thinking about that quite a bit in Europe and in the UK, looking at what, particularly after the British election, the right wing are in a bit of chaos, and they're doing a lot of thinking and discussing and debating. And I thought it'd be quite interesting to talk a bit about that, and then see what you're thinking is going on in the States. We know that we don't really have a home with the left or the right at the moment, or maybe ever. And we, in Britain, when we had the election, so we had a Labour landslide, a socialist, the left landslide. In some ways, we think that that's quite good, but in other ways, it's terrible in terms of the promotion of transgender ideology and the sort of. It looks as if what's happening on the left is, well, certainly in Britain, is they are gently just inching forwards a little bit there, but they're really on a hold. They're not going to push new trans legislation very, very quickly. And they are also pushing lots of pro-women legislation or women actions. So they're trying to be positive towards women in quite a few ways. And but they're definitely not absolutely helping us. Now, on the right, I mean, my reading is that the left in Europe and the left in Britain are very, very pro-trans. I think everybody's they're very pro-trans, and they see it as a new way of getting a community, getting the support of the young. And they're on side with the big institutions like the National Health Service, the universities, most people, and loads of companies like Big Pharma, very, very positive, and they have a lot of the media. So it's sort of working out quite well for the left being pro-trans. The right are much more confused about what they should be doing, what their message should be. And I'll just tell you about a talk I went to, which is sort of a part of the right. So I went to a talk the other day at the Free Speech Union. Now, the Free Speech Union in Britain has set up 4 years ago, and they set up in order to defend free speech. And they've defended loads of gender critical women, and they've been incredibly important in defending free speech in Britain. So on that level, that's very good that the right is saying, well, we want freedom of speech. That's not a bad thing at all. It's very, very good. But beyond that, they seem to be old libertarian patriarchs, and they seem to have no ideas. So what the Free Speech Union did, and quite a few of these other right wingers, like David Starkey, who's a very significant thinker, and Winston Marshall, they seem to basically be saying right now, the intellectual right are saying we should use the past. We should go back to the past. We should glorify history. We should look at the history of Britain to create a vision of where we're going forwards. And I was thinking, this is mad. This is completely mad. And the speech I just went to with this guy, Frank Furedi, who's got a book called The War Against the Past, what he's basically saying is the woke, the left, are destroying our vision of the past by being revisionist and doing things like saying Joan of Arc might have been a lesbian or gay or queer. And that's absurd because it's ridiculous. And they're sort of destroying our common understanding of the past. We want to go back to it. And they don't say this explicitly, but basically they want to go back to when white men were white men and they were in charge and they wrote history. And they hate the way that history is being rewritten, not just by trans rights activists, but it's also being rewritten by women and like Black activists, anti-racist activists, by everybody, anti-colonial. And so we, I think, or certainly me, but probably quite a lot of us here, have no home with these libertarian, patriarchal, free speechers. And I suppose I felt like maybe some of them might have a more sort of like have a better offer for the people, but they absolutely, after going to this talk, and I talked to lots of people afterwards, they absolutely don't. It's so simplistic. It's like it's just, I can't believe how unintellectual and unsophisticated they are in terms of they're saying just the woke are bad. And they also, this is an insight I got, which maybe some other people will have got, is the reason they want to go back to history, people like David Starkey and certainly Frank Furedi, is because they don't want us to think about climate change. They're climate change deniers. So unfortunately, our mates who are defending free speech, which is good, pretty much all of them deny climate change. And that suits it suits them to say, let's just do history. Let's think about history. Let's go back to when white men were white men and they were in charge. But they absolutely, so they might want to call a woman or be able to, but probably to keep her in her place. But they want, they also deny climate change. So I'm feeling like it's just a total chaos. Like the right has no answers whatsoever. And the ones who want to look as if they're clever are saying stuff, but it really is, it's saying we should go back to that form of history isn't going to be in any way helpful. And I suppose it just reiterates or reinforces the idea that we just have to keep on doing our radical feminist women speaking, let women speak, we create as many platforms as possible, because they absolutely won't let us speak. Neither side are going to let us say any of this sort of stuff. Sometimes you get to say a few things, Cara, but mostly none of us do. So yeah, so what do you think about that and what's going on in America?
I absolutely think we just need to do this for ourselves, which is not to say that we shouldn't pick and choose allies where we can find them. Because as you say, we do have allies on the free speech issue, among other things. One of the things that frustrates me so much about this whole thing is that I don't see anything left about gender identity at all. I see it as possibly the most sexist, homophobic, authoritarian attempt to return to regressive sex stereotypes, which is driven by industry, right? I mean, it is driven by pharma, medical companies, and tech. It is one of the most regressive movements I've seen. And so one thing that is very frustrating, of course, is that in the United States, it's the Democrats that are pushing it. And so one thing that allows Republicans to do is get away with saying the left is pushing this gender identity nonsense. And you can see why they say that, and you can see why they get away with it, because the Democrats have essentially handed them those talking points. So the whole thing is just very frustrating to me, because there's nothing left. There's nothing progressive about denying the material reality of sex. There just isn't. So that's a frustrating dynamic. Another thing that is maybe worth pointing out is that I feel like a lot of people in the United States are currently operating under the assumption or the belief that when it comes to gender identity, Democrats bad, Republicans good. And again, you can see why they think that. It is only Republicans at the federal level who are taking any sort of stand to stop this. That's absolutely true. But at the same time, I think there's reason to believe that the people who are really pushing gender identity aren't leaving the right alone. And so we know, for example, that Jennifer Pritzker is an equal opportunity donor. Jennifer Pritzker, for anyone who doesn't know, was born James. He is, I believe, the cousin of the current governor of Illinois. He's a multi-billionaire. He's known as, I think, the first openly transgender multimillionaire in America or something like that. And he gives away plenty of money to Democrats and Republicans alike. So while I'm sympathetic to the argument that Republicans are good on this issue, I worry that we need to be very careful about counting on them going forward. And the only other thing I just wanted to add to what you said is that, yes, we see it again and again and again with, what the group of men who might be called the Lefty Dude Bro podcasters, who know what a woman is and will occasionally platform women and use the opportunity to just say horrible things about women. I don't know if Kathleen Lowry is in the chat here, but a lot of people here know that I one time went on the Benjamin Boyce podcast. Benjamin Boyce, of course, knows what a woman is, and he asked me for some ideas for how we could improve society for women. And I started with very anodyne radical feminist arguments about ending male violence against women, ending male rape against women. And he and his listeners just dismissed that out of hand as absolute nonsense. They just thought that was a ridiculous starting point. And so for a lot of these libertarian men who just refuse to imagine a world without violence against women, refuse to imagine a world without male rape and sexual abuse of women, refuse to even consider getting rid of pornography. I mean, God forbid you tell some of these men you want to get rid of pornography. They just can't be counted on. They just can't be. I mean, sometimes it's a useful platform. We should take the platform when we think it's strategic and useful to do so. But we need to be very, very careful about who we consider genuine allies. The concept of hate speech is very much in the zeitgeist. Certainly in Europe, I know in Scotland, I know the concept of hate speech is a very big deal in Australia right now. In the United States, we are supposed to be protected from hate speech by the First Amendment. And for the most part, we are. One thing to say about that is that the current vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, has said that hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. That is not true as a constitutional matter, but it's very scary that he said it. And given that he has turned his state of Minnesota into a so-called trans refuge state, it is very scary to me what kinds of so-called hate speech he might want to restrict. And then I will just say, on a completely different topic, having nothing to do with so-called gender identity, I was watching a press conference given by the White House press, I forget her official title, but she does press conferences for the White House. And she introduced the concept of hate speech. And she said that a particular category of speech constitutes hate speech. And so from my perspective, to hear the White House press corps talking and just asserting that there are categories of speech that could be considered hate speech in the United States was utterly chilling. And that, of course, is coming from the Democratic White House. So yeah, we don't have a home.
It's quite nice being here because as a radical feminist, I have some views. I told this guy about my views and I said, it's nice that you're setting aside, we're allowed to talk about it. And he said, yeah. He said, actually, I'm quite okay with your, well, I don't agree with them, but I'm quite okay with your views. But quite a lot of people in this room today, it's only while they're in the free speech room, in this place, that they will be okay with it. But the moment we leave the building, or if we were in another room, they would be completely vile to you. So we've created, or it turns out that there are these little areas where because they're committed to free speech, they'll allow us to say things. And it's a bit like Julia just saying, if they're saying, oh, lesbians, all lesbians are included. I think it's a brilliant riposte, and it's a brilliant counter to say, okay, well, if you're having free speech, let's include us in it. Or if you're saying all lesbians are included, then radical feminists or political lesbians should be included. And that links up a bit to what's happening with, I don't know if it's the right, but it's happening in Britain. We've got this new big thing that's been happening for the last few years, which is called fundamental British values. And there we teachers, I'm a teacher, we get taught about fundamental British values all the time, and we're meant to be promoting them all the time. And one of them, which is really good, is tolerance of a diversity of views and freedom of speech and the rule of law. So whilst there are bad things going on and bad things happening in schools, it's not really in the wider public, this fundamental British values, but it's a push coming from sections of government, and it's got through into schools that we should respect each other and we should be allowed to have freedom of speech. So I think it is an opening for us. And I suppose we can we can call their bluff or ask them. We can ask to be allowed to do free speech and then say, but okay, so it's not, is it? Or it's not all, and you're not respecting diversity of views. Like there was a sort of trans maid recently who said to me, yes, it's a bit difficult because I have to respect your views now.
In this context, it's not even about respecting views. So I did sort of a deep dive into what I think about so-called hate speech laws. And so where I come down, and people can disagree about this for sure, but where I come down is I'm just against any laws that criminalize so-called hate speech across the board. But with this issue, it's even more insidious, because if someone calls me a mean sexist slur, I will be annoyed and I will not like the person. I will not call the police, but I will think that, you know, if a man calls me a sexist slur, I won't like him anymore, and that's fine. But if it's a crime to say that a man is a man, that is much worse, because that is an absolute assault on our ability to even say objective fact. So I've been thinking a lot about so-called hate speech laws recently. So that's why I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I think that it is absolutely the construction of readiness for us to be not allowed to speak. So there's a construction in a subtle way, but it's happening in culture. I was just watching this thing on British television because some family friends was watching it, so she said I should watch it, called Couples Therapy, which is absolutely horrific. It's this individualistic, it's couples going to a therapist who treats everybody as an individual. So there's no patriarchy, everybody's equal, there's no power structures or anything. You're just meant to sort out your relationship. It's almost all straight couples. The only so-called not straight couple is a man and a man pretending to be a woman and a woman. And the woman's just complaining about his entitled behavior. And the big taboo, which, you know, could soon become hate speech, is that he's entitled and he is sort of sucking her life from her and just is a man. He's behaving like a really narcissistic man. But of course, nobody on the show shows it. And that's a sort of soft cultural colonization, I think, and the creation of the understanding that whilst it might not be, they wouldn't say you would be done for hate speech, but they'll say you can't say that. And it just becomes a de facto bit of life and it's being spread out across the culture. It's horrific.
Good opportunity to recommend that everyone watch Vaishnavi Sundar's film Behind the Looking Glass, which is an absolutely brilliant documentary about the women and children who are harmed by fathers and male partners who decide they're women.